Hello, everybody. My name is Boutaina Guebba. I'm from Morocco. I'm a doctoral researcher at Tofail University, Kenitra. My area of interest is applied linguistics. Pleased and honored to be a part of this insightful event in which I'll be talking about the correlation between Moroccan EFL learners' attitudes towards speaking in the classroom and their speaking proficiency. My presentation is outlined as follows. First, I'll provide the theoretical framework under which this study is conducted. Then I'll move to present the research methodology, including the research problem, objectives, questions, hypotheses. Then I will move to discuss the design, which includes the nature of the study, the population, and the instruments. The research findings are also going to be discussed, and this presentation is going to be summed up by some suggestions for further research. So first, the general framework of this study is educational psychology. So it has been widely believed that psychology and education are interrelated fields. So psychology is a science of behavior which aims to understand, identify, and explain mental and physical activities. By comparison, education also tends to shape learners' behavior. So it can be deduced that both correlated fields deal with behavior. However, the effect of some psychological factors actually may prevent learners from achieving success in language learning context. Many scholars, including Harmer, Brown, Dorney, Gardner, and also Reid, have argued that there are many psychological factors that impede students' learning process. Among these factors, we can find motivation, anxiety, age, and attitudes, which is the main or the center of this research. So generally speaking, this study addresses the concept of attitudes as a socio-psychological factor that affects students' language learning in general, and their speaking in the classroom in particular. Generally speaking, these attitudes originate from social psychology. So the main actually focus of social psychology is human interaction. In other words, social psychology puts emphasis on studying how individuals' thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are constructed and how they influence people's interactions with each other. It also explores the factors that make human beings act in a certain way and the reasons under which a particular behavior occurs. The birth of social psychology was in 1895 with normal triplet theory. This triple theory actually examined how social forces affect bicycle racing. So in his experiment, Triplet noticed that riders' outcomes are faster when individuals race against each other rather than racing against the clock. This theory attracted different scholars' attention, such as Wheeler, who also questioned what influences individual behavior. Accordingly, Alpert has also coined the term social facilitation, which refers to the fact that individuals' performance is enhanced by the presence of others. Well, attitude traces back to 1924 with the Second World War. Social psychologists at that time, they were interested in studying attitudes instead of interpersonal influence. So various psychologists, of course, among which we can find many psychologists from Carl Howell of Yale University, explored attitudes by focusing on the US Army through examining the issues that affect troop morale. By time, the concept of attitude has become the entire or the center of social psychology. Now moving to the definition of attitude. Attitudes result from the individual's social interactions. So the social interactions includes the influence of the cultural, the psychological, and others' attitudes as parents and peers. If we take the example of parents as an instance, so parents also contribute in constructing their children's attitudes. A simple or crystal clear example is when parents dislike a football team, this fact may highly shape their children's first team choice. Now, what is language attitude? Specifically, language attitudes refers to opinions people hold towards languages. So languages attitudes can be either positive or negative, depending on many factors, which are going to be discussed in due course. Many scholars have been interested in language attitude. We can find Gardner, who actually believed or were really interested in studying students' ability to master a second language. And he stated that this ability is not only shaped by their grammatical and communicative competence, but also by their attitudes towards the target language. So he points out that attitudes highly contribute in language achievement, which means that attitudes affect students' beliefs and behaviors towards the target language and its community, including the speakers of this language and the culture of this language. Baker also was interested in this notion of language attitudes, and he advocates the profound impact that attitude can have on language status in a certain country. So learners who have a positive attitude, they actually contribute in preserving and maintaining that language as long as it is learned and practiced, whereas negative language attitude leads to the default of that language. This means that positive attitude enhances language proficiency, negative attitude impacts language acquisition. Now moving to the components of attitude. These components are also named as the ABC model of attitudes. There are three main components, which are the affective factor, the behavioral factor, and the cognitive factor. The affective component deals with the person's feelings or emotions about the attitude object. So it presents the like or the dislike of the attitude object. As far as the behavioral component is concerned, it refers to the way people react and behave when they are exposed to the attitude object in a particular situation. As for the cognitive component, it presents a person's belief, thoughts, and knowledge about the attitude object. And all these three aspects or components are going to be researched in this study. Now moving to the research methodology. The first thing which is presented is the research problem. So although education aims at providing learners with functional skills like communication, competence, and self-learning, teachers of English complained about the fact that students do not speak in their classrooms. So this has called for an urgency to examine this phenomenon. And this paper is investigating students' attitudes towards speaking as one factor so as to enable teachers to understand this problematic and help reduce their negative attitude towards speaking English in the classroom. As far as the research objectives are concerned, this study aims to identify Moroccan EFL learners' attitudes towards speaking in the classroom, explore the correlation between their attitudes and their speaking proficiency, and provide some pedagogical implementations to instill positive attitudes towards participating in the classroom. The research questions that this study tries to inquire are: what kind of attitudes do Moroccan EFL learners have towards speaking in the classroom? 2, are students who have a positive attitude towards speaking good speakers? 3, what can be suggested as remedies to reverse EFL learners' negative attitude towards speaking in the classroom and maintain others' positive one? When moving to research hypothesis, this study is based on two main hypotheses. The first one, which is called the null hypothesis, it claims that there is no correlation between the informant's attitudes towards speaking and their speaking proficiency. The first hypothesis claims that there is a relation between the informant's attitudes towards speaking and their speaking proficiency. Now moving to the research design. This study is correlational and exploratory in nature. So the variables identified in the present study are attitude and speaking. Attitude is the independent variable and speaking is the dependent variable. As for the participants, they are high school learners. The total number of these participants is 80, and they all belong to Ibn Abbad High School, which is located in Kenitra, Morocco. For the instruments that have been adopted or opted for, this study has opted for three main instruments, which are the questionnaire, the test, and the observation. So the research methods opted for, they mediate actually between quantitative, including questionnaire, and qualitative, such as tests. So in order to collect original data, a questionnaire is used to generalize responses from the participants using the Likert scale. So this means, or the means follow an arithmetic average of the responses, with 1 for strongly agree, 2 for agree, 3 for neutral, 4 for disagree, and 5 for strongly disagree. The questionnaire items are actually adopted from Gardner's attitude motivation test battery. As far as the test is concerned, it is employed to identify learners or the participants' speaking proficiency level. So the rating scale of the speaking test administered for the participants' oral performance is out of 20. It is distributed as 4 for very good, 3 for good, 2 for acceptable, and 1 for inadequate. And the responses, of course, are analyzed by the statistical package for social sciences, which is known as SPSS. As for the observation, it tends to actually investigate or observe the informant's behavior in the classroom. Now, moving to the questionnaire, this is just one example of the statements that learners or that the participants had to agree upon. I like English. As for testing, this is an example of a speaking test that was administered to students so as to actually exactly measure the language proficiency. So here are questions that students had to actually respond to, and here are the criteria that have been used or as a rating scale for the oral performance. The observation checklists include, as I said, the learner's behavior inside the classroom, to what extent they pay attention to what is said in the classroom, to what extent they use their mother tongue instead of using English in their classrooms, to what extent they participate, what kind of participation do they actually engage in, and so on and so forth. Moving to the research findings, as far as the first research question is concerned, Moroccan EFL learners attitudes were speaking in the classroom, as it is observed, Moroccan EFL learners attitudes were speaking. The most component which is actually there is the emotional component. This means that Moroccan EFL learners like English and enjoy speaking English in the classroom. As far as the second one, which is more related to their emotional learning, as we see, the biggest part is with 52%, in which they claim that they wished that if they could speak English fluently. This means that they really like the language, they really feel the importance of speaking English. Another actually example is, I do not feel anxious when I have to answer a question in English. And if we pay attention to this, more than 30% claimed that they disagree. This means that whenever they want to speak English, they feel a bit anxious in the classroom. And this, of course, is due to many factors. As far as the correlation of students' attitudes towards speaking and their proficiency level is concerned, as you see here, so this actually table indicates that students' attitudes towards speaking and their speaking proficiency level are indeed correlated. These findings demonstrate that there is a significant correlation between students' attitudes towards speaking in the classroom and their proficiency level. In other words, taking into account that the R is greater than the p-value, the correlation is automatically present. However, the correlation reveals to be negative, and this means that the more variable increases, the other decreases. As far as the discussion of this actually negative relation, this negative relation actually can be explained by a variety of linguistic and non-linguistic factors. As far as the linguistic factors are concerned, we can say that learners, unfortunately, they lack communicative competence. So as far as the grammatical competence is concerned, the informants not only lack the rules of the language, of the English language, but also are unable to use them accurately in oral situations. Also, regarding this course competence, Moroccan EFL learners, the participants in particular, are incapable of constructing meaningful conversations to form a coherent meaning. And concerning the social linguistic competence, the majority of the participants do not actually use the English language appropriately. So most of the time, they produce informal language inside the classroom. The majority of these participants lack also strategic competence whenever they are speaking, which lead them actually to switch to Moroccan Arabic whenever they feel stuck. As for the non-linguistic variables, they can be just summarized as we can say there is an uncomfortable classroom management with a very limited communication aids and with a restrictive corrective feedback to students while speaking, among others. Of course, these non-linguistic factors are a result of the observation which was undergone in the classroom. Now, as far as the third question, which is what can be suggested as remedies to reverse EFL learners' negative attitudes towards speaking in the classroom and maintain other positive one? So we can suggest that fostering cooperative tasks in the classroom is quite significant. Second, teachers, they need to increase students' talking time and reduce their talking time. They can be monitors, guides, and they can provide constructive feedback whenever students, of course, this constructive feedback can be preemptive or delayed until the end of the communicative activities that are adopted. Displaying a positive attitude towards learners in the classroom is also quite significant. I believe that attitude is contagious. So if actually teachers display a positive attitude, emotional, cognitive, and also behavioral attitudes towards the language, learners will do the same. It is quite important also to take learners' differences into consideration. So adopting different modes of teaching, adopting a variety of learning tasks actually that will cater for the learners' differences inside the classroom, and the multiple intelligences also that exist in the classroom context. It is also quite important or significant to raise learners' awareness of the importance of learning a language. And the last suggestion is by assigning extensive tasks that students should accomplish outside the classroom, so they will always feel related to learning that language. So as a conclusion, we can say that Moroccan EFL learners do have a positive emotional and cognitive attitudes towards speaking in the classroom. However, they lack behavioral attitude, which is a key to language learnability. And as far as the correlation is concerned, we can say that there is a negative relation between the informant's attitudes towards speaking and their speaking proficiency. Now, what can be suggested for further research, and which I highly recommend, is that many researchers, doctoral researchers or master researchers or BA researchers can conduct a research in which they tackle or they investigate the correlation between other effective factors, including motivation, anxiety, and learner oral proficiency. They can also conduct an experimental study to inquire the effect of attitude on learner speaking and writing proficiency. They also can actually conduct research to examine the factors behind possessing a positive attitude towards speaking in the classroom, or they can examine the effect of behavioral attitude on learners' emotional and cognitive attitudes towards speaking English in the classroom. And by doing so, I end this presentation by thanking you so much, and thank you for your attention and your consideration.